The reason why we're doing this workshop is it comes from the Safety Network, and there will be a whole bunch of other series and in collaboration with the TD Learning Center, St. Michael's, and Mothers at Peace. And the funding came from United Way. The reason why behind this, all this workshop that is coming along the future is there's been a lot of incidents and stuff, and we as a parent, we need to educate ourselves and learn more of what's going on and what's happening with anxiety. And there will be other workshops for us to ask questions or just learn some signs of some of the stuff that is being going on into our community. And then with all this pandemic, anxiety is so, it has gone very high up with all the being home and parents with their kids. So I'm very grateful that you guys are here to support us. And in the near future, there will be more. And right now I will introduce you to Samantha. Welcome, Samantha, to our workshop and giving us more information.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be virtually here with you and talk about anxiety and how it impacts us and how it impacts our children, especially during the tough time that we're all going through with the global pandemic. So why not now? You know, we figured this would be a good time to just address everything that's going on inside of us, despite this kind of craziness that's happening outside. So today I'm going to do a lot of talking and a lot of sort of educating, but there will definitely be some time at the end for Q&A. And what I really, really, really want you to get out of this is tools. I want to equip you with a tool belt that you can use for yourselves and for your children to help manage when times are tough, because times are tough right now. And so I want to be able to give you some tools to, when this is over, you can say, oh, Samantha talked about this, I'm going to start using that. You'll have to forgive my tech abilities. Mark is going to be front and center where that comes in, because I haven't done a Zoom like this before. I've done lots of public speaking, but you'll just have to sort of bear with me if that's okay. I'll give you a little bit of a background into what I do, and then I'll start to share my screen with you and we can get to the presentation. So I am a social worker. I work at St. Michael's Hospital and I work in the family health team. Ironically enough, I used to work at the Sumac Creek location, which is right, I think, where some of you are located, but right now I'm working at the St. Lawrence location, but I essentially do the same thing, and I help families deal with mental health struggles and things that are out of our control. I try to get families to recognize how we can kind of manage what's happening inside of us despite what's going on outside. I do a lot of work with pregnant and postpartum women and families, and I do a lot of family work. I'm a mom of 2 little boys myself, and I really try to practice what I preach, even though sometimes I don't. I definitely try to. And I know it's a struggle. I know that being a parent in this time is definitely challenging. So hopefully you'll leave tonight with some tools. So I'm going to pause for a second and attempt to share my screen, and then we'll get to the presentation. Of course, it's not going as smoothly as it did before, so just a minute. I don't know why. Mark, when I go to share screen, the PowerPoint on Keynote is not coming up. We trialed this for 45 minutes earlier today, and of course it's not working now. That's bizarre.
Actually, one sec. What I could do is I could here. I could just load it up on my screen here. One sec. Let me just grab a hold of it.
I don't know why that's not working. I could also just upload my desktop. You know, why don't I do that?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Oh, well, then everything that we had practiced is not going to work. Hold on. Let me try one more time.
Is the presentation file you gave?
Oh, here we go. I got it, guys. We're good. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Just trying to navigate this tech in this crazy scenario. Okay. And Mark, if you could just message me a message so my so the kind of talk function. Okay, and I can start then. Sorry, guys.
Did you get my message?
Yep, I'm gonna open it. I promise you this was all organized before. It's just not doing what we want it to now. Okay, so my apologies. I'm going to start now. So as I said, I'm Samantha, and I'm a social worker, and my main function is to help people cope with mental health and anxiety and depression and stress and stuff like that. The reason there's a sailboat on this slide is because the purpose of today is to teach you how to weather this storm. So the pandemic is a storm. We're all in it together. The entire world is experiencing it, but we all have different boats and we all have different tools in our boats. And so everybody I speak to, I'm trying to instill this idea of how can we weather the storm, because we don't actually have control over the storm. We only have control what we pack into our boats. And so I kind of make the joke that I throw my two little kids in the back, I throw my partner in the seat beside me, and I'm driving the boat, and I have paddles and I have life jackets and I have some extra food and a flashlight. And so I'm really trying to instill that visual for people, because we don't have control over the storm. We don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know how rocky the waves are going to be, but we have a boat and we just need to equip ourselves with the best tools that we can in this boat. Okay? So as you all know, this workshop is looking at parenting with anxiety during COVID. So the agenda. So we're going to cover a lot today, and I'm definitely going to send out the PowerPoint to Mark, who will disseminate it to either tonight or tomorrow, because there's a lot of good information in here, and I tend to talk a little fast, so I'll try to slow down so that everybody could capture what we're talking about. But this is the general agenda. We're going to talk about what anxiety is. That's the psychoeducation piece. What is anxiety? What are the signs and the symptoms? What am I looking out for in myself, and what am I looking out for in my children? We're going to look at different strategies, and this is the bread and butter of what I want to give you today. How do I cope with anxiety in myself and in my children? How do I cope? What do I do? I know that I'm not feeling like myself. How do I get to feel a little bit better? We're going to have a break, and then we're also going to have time for Q&A, and then I'm going to give you some resources in closing. All right. Okay. So firstly, what is anxiety? Fear. So anxiety is an emotional state that we experience when we're faced with a real or anticipated threat. So anxiety can't actually distinguish between what's real and what's perceived as a threat. It's normal. Anxiety is 100% normal, and literally everybody experiences some form of reality. Sorry, some form of anxiety, but it's on a spectrum. So some people don't have a lot of anxiety and then might get anxious before a test, like one of our children, or someone could be living with chronic anxiety that they feel all the time, every day, that's quite debilitating for them. It's typically manageable, and it typically is decreased once whatever they're anxious about is confronted. So if you are anxious about writing a test, or if your child is anxious about writing a test, once the test is over, typically the anxiety goes down. It motivates us to avoid the threat, escape it, and or to protect ourselves. And on a continuum from very little to severe, and it varies between people. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to jot them down. And then when we have Q&A, I think Mark's going to be asking for the questions. So just make sure to make a note of it so that you don't forget it. Oops, sorry. Here are some facts about anxiety. So anxiety disorders affect 12% of the population. Now that's an anxiety disorder. That's not just anxiety. I would argue that anxiety affects about 99% of the population, but anxiety disorder, which is a diagnosable mental health disorder, affects about 12% of the population, making it the most common mental illness in Canada. So people experience anxiety more than depression or any other mental health issue. It can coexist with depression or any type of other mental health issues like bipolar, substance use, etc. And it makes coping a lot more difficult. So on days when we're not anxious, we could probably cope really well, but that same issue that comes forward on a day where we're particularly anxious might actually be harder for us to cope. Okay. So what triggers anxiety and fear? So when our power and control is threatened, that will often lead to anxious feelings and thoughts. So the pandemic, the uncertainty of when school is starting, back in March, the uncertainty of how this was going to play out, all of these things are out of our control, and a lot of the time that can trigger anxiety. This is particularly true for parents because we not only have to account for our own selves and our own plans, but we're also caring for other people, and people are dependent on us. So when we feel like something in our life is out of control, that's one thing. And then we also, it gets worse when we also feel like there are things out of our control for people that are dependent on us, and we can't actually give them the answers that they seek. That can be really, that can be a really hard, out of control feeling for parents. So uncertainty for sure, kind of as I just explained, and thoughts of success or failure. Okay, and I don't know about you guys, but there are definitely have been times throughout this pandemic where I've thought like I am just failing as a mom. My kids have not done much today, and I've been stressed, and I've been, working, and they've been doing a lot of nothing, and I feel like I'm failing them a little bit. And so we can talk about that. I'm sure that's a common feeling. Well, I don't know if it is, but I wonder if it's a common feeling for you guys as well. Okay. So as I said, anxiety is experienced by most people, but when does it actually become a problem? Having anxiety before a test is actually kind of a good thing. It might propel us to work a little harder, study a little harder, anxiety before a job interview, anxiety before seeing your kids for the first time in a while. Let's say they've gone away and they come home and you're kind of have that anxious feeling to see them, make sure they're okay. Anxiety about talking to a manager or a boss, like these are all normative anxious experiences and don't really affect us to the core. When anxiety actually becomes a problem is when it obstructs or restricts our functioning. So if it impacts our daily life, that's a red flag. That's a point where you want to say, this feels not so normative. This feels a little bit more severe. So for example, if you feel too anxious to leave the house on a regular basis, or if you feel too anxious to go get groceries, I mean, during the pandemic, that's a little bit different, but pre-pandemic, if you were feeling like these sort of daily tasks were too anxiety provoking, that's when it becomes a little bit concerning. Some other examples would be anxiety before sleep. If you have sleep anxiety and then it really impacts your sleep and then you're not sleeping, that could be another example of when it might impact your kind of daily functioning. It could be if you're, if you have to drive for work and you get anxiety prior to getting into a car and you can't go to your job, that would be also another example of anxiety when it becomes more problematic. And it no longer reflects a reasonable view of a situation. So this is super hard to distinguish during the pandemic because things that used to feel not scary at all, like going to the grocery store perhaps, may now actually feel quite uncomfortable and anxiety provoking. So the reasonable view of a situation is up for question here, because our idea of reasonable has changed a little bit. And so we can talk a little bit more about that. So what causes anxiety problems? So typically there are 4 things. So long-term predisposing causes, so genetics in and of itself. If you have anxious family members or anxious parents, it's not unheard of that you or your children would then be anxious as a result. Childhood experiences, if you grew up with your parents being extremely anxious about things, they may have sort of rubbed that off onto you. And also stress over time. So if you have a very stressful job and you've worked there for 20 years, that could certainly build up some anxiety. There's also biological influences. So medical conditions, some of them could, like if you have a medical condition that affects your breathing, that can mimic anxiety and shallow breathing. And so it wouldn't be unheard of that that would add to anxiety, because you then sort of feel anxious all the time. Addiction issues could certainly be a biological factor that impacts anxiety, and hormonal issues, whether that's just like the certain time of your cycle, or PMS in general, or hormone imbalances can certainly affect anxiety. And then there are short-term triggering causes. So that could be kind of the things we talked about before, like a loss in your life, a change in your life, or feeling like something's out of control. And then maintaining causes. And this is the big one, because it's one thing to have anxiety, but it's something else to do something about your anxiety. And so if we don't do anything about anxiety, it's not really gonna, well, it may go away for short periods of time, but we're not really addressing the problem. So ideally, the things that maintain your anxiety are the things that we're going to change. So it's things like avoiding anxious situations. Then we'll never actually confront it, and we'll never actually be less anxious about what that is. That's like a phobia. If you're scared of spiders, you'll continue to be scared of spiders if you just avoid spiders your whole life. But if you kind of coach yourself to kind of talk yourself through a spider phobia, then over time you won't be as anxious about spiders, and you'd actually overcome that anxiety. So if we avoid or perpetuate the anxious thoughts, our anxiety won't go away. We'll have breaks in it, but it won't disappear. So we want to look at how to stop those maintaining causes and actually challenge our anxiety and kind of overcome it. So I hope this is all making sense. I know I'm throwing a lot of information your way, but I hope it's clear. And if I'm talking too fast, just write that in the comments. Okay. So what are our reactions to anxiety or fear? I'm just going to take a sip of water. Okay. So we typically have 3 reactions to anxiety. One is the physiological. That is our body's physiological response to anxiety. And I'll talk about this in more detail in the next slide, but that's what our body does to let us know we're anxious. I love talking about our physiological responses because it's typically the first sign that something is off. And in our kids, it's really noticeable. So if our kid, before they can even like identify a thought, they may say, "Mommy, I have a tummy ache." It's like, oh. And then I kind of wonder, like, could that be anxiety if something's going on? Not just like on a regular day if they have a tummy ache, but if there's change, or if they're in the middle of a transition, I wonder, could this be anxiety? So oftentimes our bodies are smarter than our brains. And oftentimes our bodies let us know that we're anxious before our brains even catch up. So we'll get to some of the physiological signs, but these are great ones to help your kids identify. Okay. The next one is thoughts. So anxious thoughts tend to come into our mind like this, like so fast, so automatic that we don't even recognize that they're there. They just become second nature, and it happens so quickly. I love this example. I think you guys can appreciate it as well. So my youngest child is 2, and he started daycare in November. And I remember saying to my partner, I'm so scared of him starting daycare. What if he doesn't sleep? What if he doesn't make friends? What if he cries all day and misses me? What if he doesn't eat? What if he like has diarrhea all day? What if he's vomiting? Like, I don't know, the list goes on and on. I had so many negative, anxious thoughts about his first day, and they came so automatic into my brain that I literally didn't even consider anything else. And my partner says to me, what if he has a really great day? And I'm only sharing this example because it's funny and true, but also because I want to express how quick our brains go to anxious thoughts as opposed to neutral or positive thoughts. And this child did not cry when I said goodbye to him at daycare on his first day, which also made me a little sad. But the reality is I didn't even take a second to consider a neutral or a positive reaction to him going to daycare. I only imagined it would be a negative experience. And it took someone who may not have an anxious disposition to say to me, what if he does great? And I was like, wow, I never even considered that. So our thoughts, all of this to say, is that our thoughts go to anxious thoughts and negative, our minds go to anxious thoughts and negative thoughts very quickly, okay? I can't see your responses, but hopefully you're smiling over that story. What are some behavioral responses? So these are things that, these are actions that we do when we're anxious. And we'll get to more explanations of that. And then the last one kind of counters the anxiety. So what coping behaviors do we already do? And that's the one we're going to focus on today, because that's what I want to teach you. That's what I want to instill in you so that you can use it for yourselves and use it for your children. Okay. I can't go to the next slide, so just bear with me for a second. Still can't. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, what are some physiological responses that I experience as a result of feeling anxious? As I said, these tend to happen before we even can recognize that our thoughts are anxious. Our body starts to give us a cue that we're feeling anxious. So sweaty palms is a common one, feeling like there's a lump in your throat. And the way I like to explain that to kids is like a frog in your throat. Or another one I don't even think that's on here is, oh, it is dry mouth. So I'll get to that. Increased heart rate, headaches, muscle tension, like clenching of your fists or feeling like tightness in your shoulders, wobbly knees, chattering teeth, dry mouth. That's a sure tell sign for me that I'm feeling anxious. Goosebumps, blushing, that's a great one to identify in our children, and stomach ache. That's also a really big one. Okay, so this is our body telling us something's not right. So before our minds could even process that we're actually anxious, our body does a really good job at saying, guess what? Something's off, you're feeling a little anxious. So these are great to go over even as a checklist with your children or with yourself. And if you're kind of feeling off and you're not sure why, do this little scan and see if any of this is happening. All right. What thoughts come to mind? So this is the cognitive piece. So some of the thoughts that come to mind, other than my child having a terrible first day at daycare, are I can't cope, I won't survive this, I'm destroying my child or my child's future. That was sort of the thought I had at the beginning of the pandemic after a stressful day of doing nothing. Something bad is going to happen, or I'm losing control, or I'm out of control. This list is infinite. So our anxious thoughts could be about anything, anyone, anytime. Anxiety does not discriminate. So it can be about literally anything. Yeah, so we'll get to what our thoughts are a little bit more coming up. Okay, so these are our behavior responses. So this is different than our physiological responses. Physiological is literally the feelings in our body or the body functions that are happening. And then the behavior is like actions or actionable things. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the fight or flight response. So if you're feeling anxious, you may want to like confront that or flee. That's the flight. There may be this super like big urge to try to control things. And that's sort of like it can become an obsession. I know that when I get anxious, I sometimes clean my house because I can't control anything else, but I can control my house cleanliness until my kids mess that up, which happens frequently. But when we're feeling out of control, some coping or some behaviors that we try to do is feel more in control. Sleep troubles, irritability. So that's like that snappiness, and we all get that, especially when our kids are frustrating us. And sometimes we can deal with it better, and sometimes we can't. And typically when we're anxious is when we have a hard time curbing or controlling that irritability. Change in appetite. So that's a sure tail sign of your body not being right. Something's off. When you stop caring for yourself, and mood changes. So frequent mood changes. Okay. So I'm going to open it up to a chat for a really quick sort of poll, I guess. I want to hear from you. The first thing I want to hear are what are things that you currently do to cope with anxiety? So these are tried and true methods that work for you. I noticed at the beginning, before we actually started the presentation, someone was talking about like a bath with salts, and you didn't say that as a coping strategy, but I wonder if that could be one for whoever mentioned that. So if you guys could, you don't need to, but if you want to come up with one or two things, you could just put it in the chat here and let me know what works for you when you are feeling anxious, whether it's like super high anxiety or low level anxiety. What works? And I'll give you guys a minute or two to just sort that out for your chat. Okay, someone said sleeping. I want to talk about that in a second. Going for a walk. Meditating, praying, slow breathing, affirmations. Perfect. Going for a long walk and sitting by, it's cut off, but I imagine that's water and reflecting. Do you think, oh, okay. All right, praying, doing things like yoga and praying for sure. So there are definitely some common ones. Praying seems to be a big one, yoga, deep breathing, walking. So these are great. Now, for sleeping is a great one. I can't sleep when I'm anxious, but I think if you have that ability, that's awesome. And hopefully you kind of wake up feeling a little bit less anxious. But these are all really, really good. Now, my next follow-up question is, getting to the root of the problem. And okay, so my next question is, what do you tell your kids to do when they're anxious? Is it the same thing that you do yourself? Cuddles, physical touch, yes. My older one really likes a strong cuddle or a strong hug when he's anxious. What else helps your children? What else do you guys tell your children to do? Does anybody who said the meditating or the breathing? Oh, listening, amazing. Hug, take deep breaths, yeah. So I'm wondering, like the people who said breathing or meditating, do you try to do that with your children? Okay, So yeah, it seems like there's some teaching your children what works for you. Slow meditating with siblings, that would be lovely to watch. So that's awesome. You guys are already doing some really great things to help your children with their anxiety. My big kind of takeaway for family work is that we can't expect our children to do things that we ourselves are not going to do. And so the fact that you're doing a lot of these coping strategies with your children is awesome. Okay, so now let's talk about the strategies that I'm recommending. They're not rocket science. They're definitely things you guys have probably already heard of. And you know, my advice would just be to practice with your kids and see what works and see what doesn't. Okay. So we're going to look at 3 different categories of coping strategies. We're going to look at calming our body down, which looks at which aims to kind of focus on the physiological sensations, which was that first kind of long list that we looked at. Then we're going to look at how to change our thinking. So that's the cognitive, the mind piece. And then we're going to look at how to change our behavior. Okay, so these are 3 really great, simple, quick strategies that you can start using tonight with your children. I imagine you guys are already doing some of these. So the first one is belly breathing, and I love to do this with kids on the floor, lying all together, and putting your hands, everybody's hands on your own tummies, and then teaching them to smell the roses. So breathe in through your nose and blow out the candles. And if you can do this with your child when they're feeling anxious, physiologically, it is proven that their anxiety will diminish and they won't feel it as strongly in their body. So this is a great, really, really easy tool. And I often coach, smell the roses, blow out the candles. And then if your hands are, if you or your child's hand are on your belly, you want to look for the belly rising and the belly deflating. So that's number 1, super simple. The next one is called progressive muscle relaxation, and you could Google this or YouTube it. There's lots of different ones on the internet, but it's basically the process of tensing your muscles and then releasing them. So I just do a quick body one with my kids. So I think about, and they're younger, but I think about like a turtle, you know, going into a shell. So I'm tensing and then he comes out of the shell. And I just sort of think of different ones to use for each main body part. Again, YouTube has a gazillion of these. I think about, like, I tell them to squeeze lemons and then release, and then squeeze lemons and then release. So there's lots of different ones on YouTube. There's some that are like a few minutes long and they walk you through it. These are great. The reason that these work so well is because it teaches your child or yourself that the difference between a tense body, which is an anxious body, or a relaxed body, which is a calm body. And the process of doing that will automatically ease the physiological symptoms, okay? The next one is, it says ground, but it should be grounding. That was my typo, sorry. So it's a grounding exercise. So this is called 5-4-3-2-1, and it's basically being in touch with our senses to identify a few different things, and I'll explain in a moment. But the way that this works is it helps give our mind a distraction from the anxiety, but it also calms our physiological awareness. So I think, so if I'm doing 5-4-3-2-1, I think of 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. And kids love this. And it's really great to basically just get a break from the anxiety, but also feel grounded. It's almost like a little bit of a meditation, like feel grounded and calm the physiological symptoms down. Okay. The next part is the cognition. Mark has experience doing the 5-4-3-2-1. That's awesome. So the next piece, so all of those 3 were really simple, basic tools to calm our physiological symptoms of anxiety down. They help, they're proven to help, and you know, we feel less anxious if our body feels less anxious. The next piece is our cognition. It's our brain, it's our thoughts. Our thoughts are sneaky. They're not always our friends, but we often think of our thoughts as facts, especially our anxious thoughts. So when I'm thinking about my son going to daycare, it was a fact. He was going to have a terrible day. It wasn't a thought. But our thoughts are not facts. Our thoughts are just thoughts. And we put a lot of weight on our negative thoughts, but we don't need to. So we're going to look at how to challenge our negative thought. So by asking ourselves these questions, when we can identify our negative thought, we will realize that it's just a thought. It's not a fact, and we don't need to put a lot of weight on this particular thought. So we can ask ourselves, is this negative thought a fact? What else could happen than my negative thought coming true? Am I giving more weight to this thought than necessary? What would happen if I didn't think about this thought? Is it helpful for me to think this way? Like, is this way of thinking serving a purpose for me? And will this thought matter in 5 years if I ignore it, or tomorrow, or a week from now? And oftentimes it won't. So this is a good cognitive exercise to really put our thinking into perspective. If we can challenge that anxious thought, it won't hold as much weight, and we can view it as any other thought. It doesn't need to weigh so heavily on us. And then the more we kind of challenge it, the more we can put it into perspective. This is a very shortened version of cognitive behavioral therapy, but I think the point is there, which is these thoughts, though they hold a lot of weight, they don't necessarily need to if we can just put the thought into perspective. These are also good questions to ask your children, whether, like, particularly the youth, but you could find fun ways to ask your younger kids this as well. Okay. So then behavior strategies. So this is ways to change your actual behavior, the actions that you are doing. And so taking care of your mental, emotional, and physical health is key to your overall well-being. So that's things like setting up a sleep schedule so that you're getting a good night's sleep, exercise, eating well, or eating to nourish your body, learning if that's of interest to you, socializing if that's of interest to you, and also getting in touch with your spiritual side. Practicing good self-care can help you take life's challenges in your stride, boost your self-esteem, and work on self-acceptance. So again, I'm going to ask you guys to sort of just jot in the chat what self-care means to you. So, or what you do for self-care. So all the things that you had said before are really good coping strategies, but what do you do to feel good, to nourish your body and nourish your soul? For me, a big one is talking to friends and cooking a nice meal. Any ideas? Oh, relax and watch something you like, taking a hot shower. Yep. Exercising, cooking, fabulous. Yep. Forgiving your past, accepting yourself, and talking to someone I trust. That's fabulous. Take a meal with friends. Awesome. Reading. Decluttering my home. Yep, me too. Okay. Okay, awesome. So these are things that are different than coping, because it's really just about nourishing you, nourishing your care, because as parents, we can't fill our kids' cups if we don't have enough water in ours. So I really advocate gardening, reading, listening to music, awesome. I really advocate for self-care, because I know I'm a better parent when I am feeling good myself. I know that I have less patience for my kids and for my partner when when I'm not taking care of myself. So I really try to prioritize self-care, so that I can be a good mom and be a good parent and be good at every other facet of my life. If I'm not taking care of myself, no one else will. And so I need to make sure that I do that so I can care for others. All right. Okay, I'm just checking the time. So we're ending a little bit early. Mark, do you want to chime in and just see what the best plan is? Do we want to take a break now and reconvene in a few minutes?
We could take the break now, or we could even open the floor to like talk a small little 10-minute Q&A. That makes
Okay,
sense.
live?
Okay, yeah, a live one.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Then we'll take a break.
Okay, so should I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, stop sharing the screen, and everybody, you could turn on your video and your mic, and you could ask a question.
All right. Any questions about any of it? This can be a time to get clarity around some of the stuff that I talked about. This could be a time to ask specific questions about if something's not working with you or with your child. This could be a time to ask questions about anxiety in general, like I'm at your service, so feel free to unmute yourself or take your video on and ask away.
Okay, I have a question. If someone is having anxiety, who is not your child but a friend or somebody you know, you're a little bit close to, what do you do like that in that immediate time to help them? You hold their hands, do you bring them water, do you let them sit down if they're standing, like what do you do?
Great question. So what would be a setting, like if you're like at the park with your child and a friend's child? Yeah,
at the park,
so,
or at the center that we go to, or at the mother's piece, somebody's saying something, they got anxiety, like what do you do right there and then?
So it's trickier because of COVID, but the first thing I would do is ask if it's okay for you to approach them, because I kind of feel like if someone's in the middle of a panic attack, it's okay to get close to them. But I would ask that individual, like, can I like, it seems like you're struggling. Can I come sit with you? And then I would do any of the things that you listed. Like, that sounds like pro, because water is a great one. Can I get you a cold drink of water? Would that be helpful for you? Can I show you how to breathe? Would that be helpful for you? And you could kind of coach
Right,
them.
yes, please. And I was just thinking, we have no pop.
Oh,
Sorry.
can someone mute? I hear your grocery list, I think.
I took care of it.
Okay. So yeah, so cold water is fabulous. Say it looks like you're having a little bit of a hard time breathing. Sometimes I put my hands on my tummy and I'll kind of like breathe in through my nose, breathe out through my mouth. Another thing that works well if people are, if you feel like someone's hyperventilating and you can't see it now because of the screen, but you could ask them to sit with their head between their knees and just kind of like bend down, and that helps regulate the body. A walk is a great one. Honestly, any of the above. The other thing you could do as well is just try to distract them. So if they're not super anxious and you can just sort of tell that they're on the verge of feeling more anxious, you could say like, did you watch the game? I don't know anything about sports, so I wouldn't ask that. But I'd say like, well, who's your favorite musician, or what music are you listening to? And if you distract them, it may give them a break from feeling anxious.
Yeah, okay.
And if they're like a really close person to you, like a cousin, like a nephew or a cousin or whatever, then you could also, you could gently say to the person and potentially the mom, like, oh, this really helps when I do this with my son. You know, like I'll lie on the floor with him before bed, and I'll teach him belly breathing. I don't know. You may want to try and like kind of just throw it out there.
Yeah, it's easier to if somebody like your child or whatever, like you can really go close to them and hug them and do. But if somebody like a little bit, that's what
Yeah, and it's definitely more tricky now. I mean, like our teachers and our daycare providers can't really hug our children right now anyways. So it's hard because of COVID, but then I would try as best you can to also just say like, I'm here and you're safe. You know, even though I can't hug you, I really, really want to, I'm here and you're safe.
Yeah, just to let them know you're there.
Yeah.
All right, let's take one more question before we take our break. I see Ines has her hand up.
Okay. Anxiety is such a huge topic in our community. I mean, I have anxiety. I don't know how to self-care because I've always helped others. So it got to this stage where for me, anxiety, it's really bad. I have anxiety and panic attacks from after my COVID-19. It's gotten worse where I had to seek for help for counseling.
Yeah.
Because that's how bad it is. But being in this community a lot is the stigma too, that residents don't speak about it. Because sometimes when you say you have this stuff for mental health, a lot of people is stigma on you.
Yeah.
Even when I said that I had the COVID, some people, when I said that, some people said, oh my God, you had it. It's like, stay away from me. So people don't talk about those things. And now this anxiety of being home, and like I said, for me, what happened in my experience, my anxiety is very high.
Yeah.
Where I have to stop sometimes and literally breathe, or I start crying.
Yeah.
So that's why for this workshop, I want residents to get, or us to get educated as signs and stuff, because it's so important to understand our body and know the signs of all this stuff, because sometimes we don't know why we're having this or why we're crying. Sometimes we say, oh no, I'm just down, but it not knowing that it could be the anxiety or stress.
Yeah.
So I would just like for the residents just to understand what's going on and what's happening in their own body, and not be afraid of talking about it. We don't need to stay silent, because we need to look for the support.
And I hope I normalize, like, I truly believe that like 99% of people experience some form of anxiety, and then you throw having children, and then you throw relationships and friendships, and then you throw work, of course, and then you throw this global pandemic where we, for the first 3 months, we weren't really allowed to leave our homes. Like, that's extremely anxiety provoking, especially for people who are used to community and used to like friendship and socialization. Like, it has been, I would argue, one of the hardest times for us as parents and as well, I don't want to say women, but as parents, let's say. So if there's any point in your life to recognize that you would feel anxious, like now would be it, because everybody is feeling anxious. So I hope that I was able to normalize the feelings of anxiety, because it happens so quickly and on such a continuum that on any given day we'll have little bouts of it that we may not even notice, but let's take notice of them and let's try to work at them.
And also it's a language, we don't have a language, the culture where we come from, so that makes it hard to explain to the people, and that you could have conversation with your neighbor and your friend to express yourself. That is also, that's the gap that's happening. And in some culture, you don't have anxiety word or depression word to express yourself in a way that your neighbor could understand you. I think it's about lack of education as well. Yeah.
That's a really good point. So could we maybe let's think about ways that we could express how we're feeling so that people who are less in touch with their feelings or mental health issues would actually understand it.
Hmm.
Has anyone said anything that has worked for them? Like, I don't know, my brain sort of goes to like, I'm just feeling off, because someone may understand that and they may not get like how off or why I'm off. But has anyone come across a nice way to sort of express how you're feeling so that someone else who may not be as in touch with their mental health would understand it? It's a difficult thing to do sometimes as a comment, for sure.
Like someone will feel like I just feel like crying. Even if they're not crying, they go, I just feel like crying. I don't know what's happening, but I just don't feel good. I feel sad. I feel like crying. And I think they don't really know what's really going on.
That's a good point, because I wonder, you raised a really good point. I wonder if you could tell them more about the physiological symptoms that may resonate with them, because we all experience the physiological symptoms of anxiety, whereas some of us may not be able to understand it. But if you sort of, like if I said to someone, oh, my tummy's in knots and it feels like I have a frog in my throat, they may be able to understand that as opposed to, oh, I'm feeling really anxious today. I don't know. It's worth a shot. Just sort of explaining the physiological or the behavioral symptoms instead of touching on the cognitive ones, because people may not be responsive or understand that piece.
All right. So I think it's about 6:03 right now. We could take a quick 10-minute break. When we come back from the break, we're going to continue the live Q&A. But in the meantime, during the break, use the public chat. Go ahead and type in your question in the public chat, and then that'll allow us to kind of queue everybody in terms of asking their questions to Samantha. But as well, we also have a survey for you guys to take, and it's only 4 questions. So I'm gonna post that survey in the public chat, and then we'll resume back at 6:15.
And if anyone wants additional strategies, or if they want clarification on some of the strategies, just put that in the chat.
So I just posted the survey link in the chat. Take a look at it. Otherwise, we're gonna resume back at 6:15. So everyone, you could take a break in the meantime. All right, so we're back. So let's continue with the live Q&A. The first person I'm going to bring up is PSAC. Are you there? Turn on your video and your audio.
Maybe they want to be anonymous, perhaps?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm happy to answer this just generally. So the question is, I find that I must always be doing something. It doesn't matter what it is, but I find it hard to concentrate on my own work or job. What do you think that is? So I think that is without knowing anything else about the person asking this question, I think that's a function of what I call motor mind. And to me, what motor mind is basically just our thoughts going and going and going and going and going and going and not stopping, even though they may not be like full thoughts. They may just be like snippets of things that we have to think about at all points of the day. So that's kind of my guess, is that this feeling of you must always have to do something and have to like be busy. And then it's making it hard to concentrate on the things you need to concentrate on, makes me think that you're sort of just like, there's a million pieces of the puzzle and you can't stick any of them in the right place because there's too much going on. And to me, that seems like motor mind or overwhelm, or kind of this feeling of like emotional heaviness, because oftentimes as parents, we have 100,000 things to do in any given minute. So what I would recommend, so I can't say if this is anxiety or not, but this is common. This is definitely a common thing. And so I would say journal and try to get some of those thoughts out of your brain and onto a piece of paper, because oftentimes when our brain is more calm and more clear, we can think more clearly of the things we need to do. So buy a notebook from the dollar store and literally just write those thoughts out and onto a piece of paper. And I would try to do this in the morning and at night. I think it will help. It helps a lot of people with sleep. You didn't identify that as being an issue, but it will also help clear your mind. And then I also think writing a to-do list. So if you have a lot of things on your to-do list, this is super general, but it helps. Even breaking that down into daily things and doing 1 or 2 things per day to break down that list, instead of doing like 7 or 10 things in a given day or having that expectation of yourself. So I hope that kind of answers it. It sounds like you're overwhelmed, and it sounds like getting some of those thoughts out of your brain will help you then have space and capacity to concentrate on something else, like work or even just downtime. And if downtime is hard for you, I would also look at scheduling that into your calendar. So if, on the weekends, schedule it like TV time for an hour, or walk time, or read time, or bath time, and actually just schedule it into your calendar so that you can kind of force yourself to have that time to unwind. But your brain needs to be calm in order to feel the effects of it. And if your brain is calm, then it will be meaningful, kind of restorative time. And if your brain is not calm, then you'll just kind of sit there frustrated. So in order to get your brain calm, I do think that journaling would be helpful, and kind of scheduling that downtime into your schedule. Okay. I get up every night between 2 and 5 a.m. thinking about everything that I can't control. I hear ya. I cannot stop the different thoughts. How do I control that? And would I need to get professional help? Great question. So sleep is tough right now. For most people that I speak to, sleep is tough right now. Even if there's not difficulty falling asleep, there's difficulty staying asleep because we have so much on our minds. So here's, and I'll actually include this sleep, this sheet, sorry, in the handout or the email that Mark will send. There's a fabulous sheet about sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene is basically sleep rituals that help us fall asleep and stay asleep. And what we don't want is our bed to become torture chambers. And it sounds like between the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. every day, your bed becomes a torture chamber because you're lying there, you might be tossing and turning, and you're thinking about all the stuff that is out of your control. So one of the things I want you to do is turn your phone off. And so if it's on, turn it off. Don't have that available to you, and try to go back to sleep the way you would ordinarily. If those thoughts, that motor mind of thoughts, is keeping you awake, I want you to get out of bed. I want you to go somewhere quiet and dark, like your living room, your kitchen, even the bathroom floor. I don't care where it is, but I want you to go somewhere dark, and I want you to do something boring. So write in a journal, read a book with a little light. I don't even care if it's like reading the phone book. Do whatever it is that could be a little bit distracting and a little bit boring. And only return back to bed when you feel tired enough to sleep. I do not want you lying in bed for 3 hours every night, unable to sleep and being kind of wide awake. You need to tell your body it's sleep time again, but getting out of bed is a good way to do that because it kind of gets you tired again. So I would journal, and I would also try to do that exercise that I gave you about the rational, like the challenging the negative thought. So if you wanted to write down things that are within my control and a list of things that are without, like not in my control, I also think that would be helpful, because there oftentimes there are things we can do to help even the things that are out of our control. Sorry. But it also could be the acknowledgement that this is, kind of writing this out, like this is not within my control, therefore I need to let it go. This is within my control, and I'm going to address this issue tomorrow by doing this, this, and this. And it's kind of organizing your thoughts out so that you can make sense of what is truly within your control and try to let go of the things by acknowledging what is truly not within your control. But again, your body will not go to sleep if your mind is busy. So the most important thing is to free up that space in your mind so that your mind can be calm and that you have the capacity to then actually go to sleep when you're tired. If your brain is too busy and functioning too much before bed, it's going to be a lot harder to fall asleep. So my advice to most people is journal, journal, journal. Vacuum those thoughts out of your brain, put them somewhere else. And if you're not falling asleep, get out of bed, do something boring, and only get back into bed when you're asleep. That could even be watching like reruns of your favorite show. Has to be a little bit boring though, not something that's going to keep you awake. So in terms of getting professional help, like try this stuff out and see. It's also worthwhile talking to your doctor. If the sleep is really bad, they may be able to give you some suggestions based on the fact that they kind of know you well. But I would try some of this stuff out, and I'm going to include this sleep hygiene handout and look at that sheet and see if there's any other things that sound like reasonable for you to try to help your sleep. Okay.
I was gonna call for Lloyd. Lloyd, are you there? Give him 15 seconds and we'll see.
Sure.
There, I'm here.
There he is.
Well, I got my
Hey,
learned
Lloyd.
to get myself off mute. I don't know how to. I don't know if this, like the question I want to ask you, it's more about where, I guess, in one way, because I'm visually impaired, I always seem to meet people or try to anxiety if I wanted to get into a relationship or anything like that with somebody, but yet I get very nervous, and that to even go up to ask. Is there a way that, like I'm scared the answer is going to be no and all that stuff. So I'm just wondering if something like that, with that, I don't know. It kind
Yeah.
of, that's the question because, but also because I'm visually impaired, like a lot of women that I've met or in the past have, as kind of, I was scared to go up and ask, and when I did, I got turned down, and then I never did it again. Like
Yeah.
that.
So
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So to me, as me being, then I end up being shy about it,
Yeah.
about that, and it's like I get very nervous now.
Okay. So I would approach this the same way I would approach any anxious thought. So it sounds like the anxious thought is I don't want to be rejected.
Yeah.
And I would rationalize and talk yourself through that. So it's those three things. It's the physiological symptoms. So you might see someone that you want to approach and feel butterflies in your tummy or dry mouth, or you might sweat or shake, whatever. So with that, you'd want to pick one of those three things, probably like the deep breath, to kind of coach yourself through calming your body down. And so before approaching, you could smell the roses, blow at the candles. Then you want to address the cognition, which is, how do I know that this is going to be an experience where I get rejected? I actually don't know. I'm just assuming that I'll be rejected without actually knowing what the outcome is. So why am I thinking so negatively about it? What if it's like my kid at daycare and it goes perfectly well and smooth, right? So we jump to the negative so quickly, but we don't actually know the outcome until we actually try. So it's asking yourself those questions. Like, I don't know that I'm going to be rejected. So why am I going there? Maybe it will be just fine. Why am I putting so much weight on this thought? Maybe she does reject me, but I'm just going to go on about my day and not let it kind of sit with me.
Okay.
Will this thought matter in 5 years? Probably not. If you get rejected, you'll probably forget about it in a few days and move on. Well, certainly not 5 years, right? Like maybe it might take longer than a few days. And then you'd want to work on, the behavioral piece, which is if you're nervous to approach, it's that baby step, right? It's those step-by-step coaching yourself through it. And if it doesn't go as well, you make sure you give a big heaping scoop of self-care afterward. And then you deal with the loss.
Right. Oh yeah.
But I also
that I asked because I've seen it in the past, so I'm just curious about like stuff like that, because I always think about the negative and not the positives.
Bingo.
Right. And
we don't know the outcome unless we actually do it. We don't know the outcome.
It's like you're predicting the outcome before it even happens, and it could be the other way around, right?
Lloyd, that's exactly it. It's called predictive thinking. You've literally just identified something. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Predicting the outcome without knowing what the outcome actually is.
Okay. That's good to
know. Good. So what do we have to do when the children have a lot of anxiety or fear? So that's a great question. It totally depends on the child and on the what they're anxious about, but I want everyone to write this down. This is a question. This is what I call the miracle question when it comes to our kids. If your kid can identify or tell you or disclose in some way, shape, or form that they're anxious or fearful, I want the first thing you ask them is, what can I do to help you? I don't want you to tell them don't be scared or fearful or anxious or sad. I don't want those words to come out of your mouth because that minimizes it and it doesn't actually help the situation. What does help is giving them the space to identify what they think might be helpful in that situation. They may not be correct, or you know, they may say, but get me an ice cream, and you don't have to say yes to that. But if you can put the problem solving skills back on the child, no matter what age, it will serve them well in the long run. So if your child says to you, Mom, I'm really fearful of this, or I'm feeling really anxious, or I have butterflies in my tummy, the first thing that comes out of your mouth ideally would be, I'm sorry to hear that, honey. What can I do to help you? And they may actually surprise you and come up with some pretty fabulous things, or they may not, in which case, problem solved. Together, so that it's not necessarily coming from you only. And so you could say to them, what can I do to help? And if they say, I don't know, then this is the perfect time for you to role model. And you could say, well, when I'm feeling anxious or when I'm feeling scared, I take deep breaths, or I write my fears out, or I do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or I challenge that thought like I'm a detective and I prove that thought's not a fact, it's just a thought. Or I go for a walk, or I cook a delicious meal, or I talk to a friend, or I, you know, like a tight squeeze. Whatever it is that will be helpful for you may actually be helpful for your child too. And the biggest thing you can give them is role modeling that coping behavior. So when I'm anxious or frustrated, I'll often go, I'm really frustrated. I'm going to take 5 deep breaths. And my kids see me do this, because when I want them to be less frustrated, I encourage them to take 5 deep breaths. So number 1, what can I do to help? See what they say. Number 2, try not to say, oh, don't worry, or don't be scared of that, or there's nothing to be scared of. In their mind, their fear might be very real. And then the third thing is role model different coping strategies that you find helpful so that they can do it with you. Hopefully that's helpful. How do I get rid of or control the spotlight effect when it seems that everyone is watching you when they are actually not? Thinking about something helps, but I would like to have more control. I also think this is from okay. So I'm not sure what the spotlight effect is, but it sounds like when it seems that everybody is watching you. So
by the way, I turned her mic on.
Oh.
Okay, so basically, like, I feel like sometimes when I'm going on like the TTC or something, or like a public area, I just feel like I know I'm a conscious person naturally, and I just feel like people are just watching me, and I know that they're not always watching me. And I also understand, like, I'm a pretty sensitive person, so I'm like really aware of what's around me. But it just, I don't know, it kind of bothers me sometimes. So I was wondering, like, what you think about that.
Okay. So to me, it sort of sounds like being what I call internally focused versus being externally focused. So when you're internally focused, riding the subway, you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, like, why are these people looking at me? Like, what's going on? Do I look okay? Does my breath smell? My jeans not cool enough? Do I have food in my mouth? It could be anything. But generally just like, why are these people looking at me? So that's really being internally focused, like really focusing on your thoughts inside your head versus being externally focused. And so instead of thinking about all these thoughts that are truly just thoughts, you don't know if anybody's looking at you, you don't know why. If someone is looking at you, you don't know why. You're just thinking negatively that people are perceiving you in some way, shape, or form. Truly, unless you ask someone, are you looking at me? I'd maybe do it more politely, but unless you ask someone, you won't actually know what, maybe they're off staring into space and you just happen to be kind of where their eyes are hitting. You truly don't know unless you ask, which again, I wouldn't really, like on the subway, I wouldn't really advise you to do that. But you're getting to a point of internalizing behavior that you truly don't know the basis of. You're just assuming that they're looking at you negatively. For all you know, they're like super admiring, I don't know, if you're a glasses wearer, maybe they like your glasses. I have no idea. But there could be a million things. And unless you ask and unless they give you an answer, you can't know. Mm-hmm. You're just assuming. And you're probably assuming the negative. So until you actually just Sorry, I just got a message, so I was slightly distracted. But unless you actually know for a fact what's going on, you're assuming the negative. So I would try to be externally focused. So that is not thinking about what's going on in here, but playing a game on your phone so that you're just not looking for, negative attention if you're perceiving it as that, or spark up a nice conversation with the person sitting beside you. Again, hard to do during COVID. Or listen to a podcast, or bring a book and read a book with you. I just don't think that you can assume that these people are looking at you for a negative thing unless you know that factually they are. Until you know if it's a fact, it's just a thought, and it's a negative thought, and it's not serving you, and it's not doing it's not serving a purpose in your life. So be externally focused and try to distract yourself and forget about it.
Okay, that actually makes sense. Like just basically distracting yourself for other things instead of being inside your own head.
Yeah.
But like for sometimes like I try distracting myself by reading something or like playing a game, but like it does not work unless I get up and like walk away. You know what I mean?
So I would really, so distracting is good as for sure, but I would really try to challenge the thoughts then. I want you to sit there and ask yourself, what facts do I have? Like truly, what facts do I have? And you don't. I sound harsh and I don't mean it to be, but like you don't know at all why someone might be looking in your direction. You have no clue. So instead of thinking that it's a negative thing, spin it. Maybe they love my hairstyle. Maybe they think my shoes are cool. Maybe I'm talking really loudly on the phone to my mom. Like, I have no idea. But there, like I said before, there could be a million reasons. So we don't need to jump to the negative, and it doesn't need to be a perception that weighs heavy on you. They're just looking at me. Like I said, maybe they're just lost in space, or maybe they had a horrible day and they're if they focus on one thing, they're gonna stop themselves from crying. Like we genuinely have no idea. It's like when we were like younger. Personal anecdote. Like I remember thinking like, why didn't this person call me back? And I think, oh, they didn't like me. They don't like me. When really, I have no idea what's going on. It could be true that they don't like me, but unless I ask them, I won't know. And so why am I thinking negatively? Maybe they got called up for dinner and their grandma's over and they can't leave the table for 5 hours. Like, we don't know. So instead of jumping to the negative, just sort of appreciate that you don't know the facts. You don't know this person. You don't know what happened in their day. You don't know why they're staring at you. And it doesn't matter because I'm going to distract myself now.
Thanks a lot, Samantha. I really appreciate it.
Does that sort of hit what you were thinking?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. 1 second. Okay. Okay. So there's a question about a child feeling like a burden and having anxious thoughts and feelings around being like a burden, despite parents assuring the child of being loved, and struggles of self-esteem and being good enough, both at home and at school. So are there ways that we can reassure a child like this that they are loved and worthy of being loved? So this is such a great and super loaded question. My initial instinct would be what happened in this child's history that might contribute to them feeling this way. But without knowing any of that and having no idea about anything else related to this child, I would say this. So it's like, instead of convincing your child that they are worthy, try to see if they can come up with ways. Because you can essentially tell someone till you are blue in the face that you love them and that they're worthy of being loved, and that they're like good and special and important. But if it has to, the child has to believe it coming from them in order for them to believe it. That was jumbled, but hopefully you understand. So it's like, if you and this child could identify, like, doing a few minutes every night of thinking, like, what are some awesome things I'm good at, and write them down, or what am I grateful for today that I did that I'm proud of myself, or what behaviors am I showing that make me feel loved. So it essentially has to come from, like, because you can tell this child all day long that they're worthy, and they may not believe it until they understand it and come up with it themselves. So I would really try to allow, like, facilitate that growth within the child. Hope that makes sense. It's hard to answer that without really knowing more background. But also, so the one piece is, like, facilitating them to recognize what they're doing great at, and even asking them, tell me the ways that I show you I love you. So do I hug you? Yeah. Does that, when someone hugs you, does that mean that they love you? Oh, that's a good sign, depending on the age of the child. But also, what does mommy do to show you that she loves you? Write them down. Let's write them down together. Oh, so when mommy does this, and when mommy cooks you lunch, or makes you dinner, or takes you for a walk, those are ways that mommy shows you that she loves you. And just sort of try to get the child really involved in that, instead of you constantly telling your child, you're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy, because you could go blue in the face before your child actually believes it. It sounds like this is a super smart kid who actually needs to come up with the answers themselves. Hope that helps.
Samantha, I think there's a question here where it says, what we have to do when the children have a lot of anxiety or fear?
So I hope I answered that previously, which was role modeling. So this is what mommy does when she feels anxious or fearful or frustrated, by doing the physiological pieces, the cognitive pieces, and the calming pieces. And then also just ask your children, like, what can I do to help? As opposed to, we all say this all the time, like, don't worry about that. Well, that doesn't help me. I'm super worried. Don't tell me not to worry. Now I feel, like, isolated for being worried. So if someone says, oh, don't worry, versus, oh, that sounds tough. Like, what can I do to help? How can I help you? That is so different. And one is so inviting, and the other is completely isolating.
All right, we got 7 more minutes until the end of the live Q&A. I think we have run out of questions in the public chat, but I'm gonna open up the forum to anybody here. If you want, you could turn on your mic and ask a question for Samantha. If we don't get any questions in the next 2 minutes, then we're gonna jump over. We're gonna go into the wrap up.
I just wanted to say something. We as a parent have to be very mindful when our kids are saying that they're going through all this anxiety and stuff, because sometimes us as a parent say, oh no, you don't have nothing, don't worry, just do whatever you have to do, just watch TV or something. And this is where the huge concern is sometimes, especially with youth, when they don't know who to go to or what to do, commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we're bringing this workshop, because it has to be probably open to have an understanding, because that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yes. Can I chime in for a second? If your youth are coming up to you and saying, I'm really anxious, I'm struggling, you already are doing a fantastic job. Typically, youth do not go to their parents or their family members. Youth go to youth. And so if your teenager is saying, Mom, I'm struggling, good for you. That's half the battle right there. They're opening up the conversation for help. And so ideally, your response to that could be, let's talk. Tell me what's going on. Let's problem solve this together. This is what helps me. Do you think this would help you? Do you want to talk to your doctor about this? Like, you just, they've given you the window, now you open it. I mean, cautiously, you don't want to like overwhelm them, but the fact that they're coming to you and telling you this and disclosing this to you means you are doing a fabulous job. And now you just have to take it that step further and talk to them and let them know that it's a safe space and no judgment, and let's figure this out.
Yes. Wow.
The other, so maybe I'll just do like a quick little closing. So I'm gonna provide Mark with some resources. The first one that I always recommend is to talk to either you or your child, talk to a family doctor. The second one, which I'll include in the email to Mark, which he'll disseminate, is there's a few online resources that offer like guided guided online therapy that is like self-directed, but then you can speak to a therapist 4 times, and they're free and they're really, really good. The third thing is a booklet on parenting in the pandemic, and it talks a lot about one of the questions that was asked earlier, which is like things are within my control and things are without of my control. And then the other one is what's called What's Up Walk-In. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it. It's a youth organization, and they do virtual walk-ins. So if your child is experiencing a crisis, you can call and someone will be able to talk them through what's going on. So I'll send all of that to Mark. There's one more question: how to deal with parents' anxiety over back to school plans. I'm with you. I feel it too. It's again an issue of what's within our control and what's not. So I am watching the news like a hawk. We have no idea what the actual plan is. So I would come up with tools that are within your control. So depending on the age of your child, talk to them about, actually there was a really good resource, and I'll include it as well. It was from, I forget, but it was circulating like social media. I'm just going to write a note to myself, like it was something like the TDSB resource for kids getting back to school and how to manage it. So there are going to be things within your control, and there are going to be things out of your control. So we don't know when school is going to start. We have no clue. But here's what we can do. We can educate our children on like hand hygiene, and we can educate our children on mask hygiene. We can do all the prep that we can before actual school starts. So like making sure they have all the supplies that they need. We can talk to them about, other like anxieties about school from previous years and how to deal with them. But in terms of actual school and figuring out plans, we simply don't know enough yet. And so try to take it day by day. Try not to plan too much in the future and to let your mind go there. Try to say like, okay, well, I know school's not opening tomorrow, so here are my plans for tomorrow. I know school's not opening Friday, so here are my plans Friday, and then do that next week. I had to do a lot of that when the pandemic started, and I was still going into the hospital every day, and we didn't have anything to do with our children. So it was like, okay, tomorrow I know that I can rely on this person for support. I don't know what I can do the day after that, but tomorrow I'm good. And then go day by day instead of thinking like 2 months from now, 3 months from now, a month from now. It's out of our control. We don't know yet. Okay? So hopefully that helps, taking it day by day and preparing for the things that are within your control as much as you can. There's one last question I want to get to. I think it's a audio question.
No, it's from Angel. What if your child?
Is it up here?
Yeah.
Sugary.
About 6:46.
Oh, that's the one I just answered. How to deal with parents' anxiety over back to school plans.
No, there's just before it. What if your child does not confide in you? Then what are some of the steps to get them to talk?
Oh, I don't see that. Maybe it was private.
Oh, let me see. Oh yeah, I just sent it to me private. One sec.
Okay,
Yeah.
so sorry, can you repeat it?
I just sent it to.
Oh, what if your child does not confide in you? Then what are some steps to get them to talk? So that's tough. I would just say instill and foster an atmosphere of acceptance. And so, you know, saying things like, well, I'm here if you do decide you want to talk. I wouldn't push it. Like if you say, do you want to talk? And they say no, okay, I'm here if you do want to talk. And then the other thing is if you can create an environment that you can role model to them that it's okay to not be okay, then they will feel comfortable not being okay. And just sort of foster that. I mean, they may not, and they may talk to friends and they may talk to other people, and you could even offer, like, if you don't want to talk to me, would there be someone else that you'd want to talk to? But don't push it, and instead foster an atmosphere that you can talk to them and that you can show them how you cope, and then hopefully that will allow them to feel okay about confiding. And also be calm if they do confide in you. I think one of the fears is that like parents will freak out. So just be like, okay, so how do we solve this problem? And try to be as calm as you can be, which I imagine most parents try to be, but depending on what your teen is telling you, it could be hard.
Okay, I think that's it for Q&A. Thank you very much, Samantha. I'm gonna turn it over to Ines for the wrap up.
Samantha, thank you very much for coming and giving this workshop to our residents in the community. And thank you for everyone who came into the Zoom and join us and learn more about anxiety. All the information will, Mark will email the information to all the residents that join in. And there will be more workshop along in the future from September on. Mark will email everyone if they would like to join us in for the other workshops. So please, it's very interesting. I know it's a different world now in Zoom. It's not live. Hopefully soon we'll all be together and there will be more of being there and stuff. But
Good.
like I said, there will be more workshops and more learning to do. And thank you everyone for joining us and like I said, for everything.
Guys, it was such a pleasure to chat with you this evening. Hopefully you took some tools away with you, and yeah, best of luck as we navigate these kind of scary waters, but we got this.
Yes.
We might
Thank you,
invite you
everyone.
again, Samantha. I said we might invite you again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
everybody, have a good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.